All right, welcome. I'm here with Mel Varga, the Tech Integration Coordinator at the International School of Macau and a Google Certified Educator and Trainer. We're talking all things thriving, schools thriving through the pandemic. Thanks for being with us, Mel.
Hi, Joseph. Glad to be here and looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, so Mel, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what it is you do at TIS Macau and a little bit more about the school.
All right. Well, my role at TIS Macau, I'm the Technology Integration Coordinator, so that's a big, long title. But it sees me doing a lot of different things. Primarily talks about, or I deal with technology in terms of teaching and learning at the school. So anything tech related that will help teaching and learning I'm involved in. So that might be things like device allocation, learning platforms, teacher training and professional development, working with students, co-teaching with teachers, co-planning with them. It's kind of the gamut. That's basically all the things that I do. And probably some more things that I've forgotten as well. The school itself is a Canadian school. It runs the Alberta curriculum, as well as the DP at the high school level. So we do have an IB cohort as well. Right now we're nearing about 1,400 students. The school is about 17 years old. And I remember when the school was 500 people, and now we've grown quite a lot in a short period of time, which I think speaks highly of the school and the community, their trust in us and what we've done. In terms of the clientele at our school, it's really quite a broad mix. We have a lot of students from all over the world. I think anywhere from about 40 to 50 different nationalities you will find at our school. Over time, I think we've seen more and more local students wanting to come to our school. So I think the number of, I would say, expats has kind of dropped a little bit just because there's more and more locals who want to come to our school. So I'm going to say it's about 60% local students, 40% international students. The school itself, it's near and dear to my heart. I've been there for about 11 years. And, my children have attended the school, graduated from the school. And so they've had some really positive, amazing experiences. And I think the school does a really good job of kind of merging East and West, so to speak, and coming together in this really nice blend of it's a really wonderful community to be a part of.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've had the chance of visiting TIS Macau a few times. Yeah, it's right there next to, the Macau University of Science and Technology, the northern part of the Cotai Strip. And, but yeah, a lot of really good global citizenship programs recently too. I know with folks from Inspire Citizens, and they brought in Salvador and did some really interesting work. I guess that was a couple years ago now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, really nice school community. So I imagine that the whole pandemic has been a difficult and emotional experience for everyone. And so I'm wondering if you can, tell me a little bit what that's been like for you, and anything that the school might have done to help support you in that emotional aspect of, forget about being, technology integration coordinator, just as a person, as a parent, you want to share a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a very interesting experience, I have to say. We've never, really, experienced anything like this in our life. So it's been a real interesting time. Professionally, I think it's been difficult for a lot of people, myself included, because we miss having that connection with our colleagues and our students. I just think one of the best things about being an educator is just having that community of individuals that you see on a regular basis. Your colleagues, people on the leadership team, even people, support staff, everybody in the school, I just felt a bit of a disconnect from those people that, made a real impact on the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I just miss the students as well. I mean, I think for me, being an educator is all about being with students, and not being around students and that energy and that enthusiasm was really, really tough. And, I kept in contact with some students, specifically from my volleyball team. And they were all really missing school. They were missing their friends. They're just missing their normal routines. And they were struggling with, a very different routine, and not being able to, maybe experience the normal things that a teen would experience. And I think for a while there, when there was maybe some concern, but also uncertainty, there was a lot of students who just didn't get out. And I think that was, tough mentally and emotionally for a lot of people. Personally, it's been difficult as well. It's just, it's tough when you're constantly worrying about the unknown. And, I have family back in Canada. My father's quite elderly. I'm concerned about his safety. I'm concerned about, if something happens to him, will I even be able to go and see him? Getting, out of the country, getting back in the country would be, difficult. So yeah, there's a lot of unknowns, and that does make things interesting, for sure. My youngest daughter is supposed to be going off to university. We're not sure what that's going to look like. So whether she's here working remotely or can make it to Canada, what does that look like for us? Can we even do that? So again, it's been a little bit tough, dealing with this whole situation. So it kind of feels like a life's been thrown upside down.
Yeah, and there, so many, it's so many stories that just of that unknown, the unknown and the uncertainty. But each of those stories is unique and special and specific to to each person, each family. And I think one of the things that a lot of folks, especially in the international school community, have, always known, but it's become more apparent, just the connection of the school being a place for not just the academic part of it, but connecting people and building relationships, and being some consistency in an otherwise, living in a foreign country and things like that can be maybe difficult for newer international educators. So tell me, I guess, a little bit when, think back to when all this started. What was we've been living through this uncertainty and unknowing for so long now. When this first started, what was the school's initial response to the pandemic, in terms, for its faculty, for teaching and learning, for all these things?
Well, I think there was a sense of we were really a bit flying by the seat of our pants, to be honest. I think there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of what exactly school would look like going forward. We were waiting to receive some guidelines from the education department of what we could do and what we couldn't do. I think there was a little bit of concern on teachers, what will I be able to do? Will I be able to do it well? So I think there was definitely a feeling out period for the first week or so. Now, the timing was interesting because we were off on Chinese New Year break, and we heard, I think, about maybe 2 or 3 days before that holiday that the school was going to be closing. And so there wasn't a lot of time to really prepare prior to that holiday. And I think a lot of people had traveled, myself included. So we came back knowing that the school was going to be closed, but it was still going to be up and running virtually. Now, I think the first week, we saw a variety of different things happening in classrooms and with teachers. So I think we had some, I would call them high flyers, who just had a plan right away, and they were going online and they were doing, posting either videos or using a lot of content on Classroom. And some others who were doing a little bit of that, and then a few that weren't quite sure what they were going to do. And so I think the first week we spent some time figuring out what we should do and how we were going to do it. So I think the first week was a little bit disjointed, to be honest. But we did survey the students and parents during the second week of the pandemic and of the school closure, just to get their sense of, take a look at the first 2 weeks. Tell us what were some things you think worked really well. What were some of the things that you didn't like? What were some things that you think are missing? And so that survey was very well responded to. And we have some really good feedback from all the stakeholders. And I think that helped kind of guide our plans moving forward, basically. So I think after that data came in, we came up with a very, I'd say, a much more structured plan in terms of expectations for teachers, expectations for students, and even information and guidance for parents. And so I think those are the key areas that once we figured out, then we could really move forward. And I think from that point on, things ran rather smoothly. Our teachers felt comfortable, everybody felt on the same page. So I think from, definitely week 3 on, I would say we did a really, really, great job with the online teaching and learning component.
And yeah, that's, talking to you, that this is fantastic, because this is all about schools as learning organizations, right? Not the learning that goes on, in the classroom necessarily, but how schools learn. And I'm hearing, getting feedback from your stakeholders, right? Talking to parents, talking to students, I'm sure talking to teachers. And then from that, revising the program. What's some of that feedback that you received, and how did the school, I guess, reorganize itself in terms of structure, the schedule, what those expectations were for students and teachers?
One of the interesting ones was that there was students were spending too much time online. I think we maybe tried to do a little bit too much. And we tried to make the virtual learning very similar to the face-to-face learning. And that just wasn't working out. A lot of students and parents said that, spending too much time online. And, it didn't leave a lot of time for maybe doing the work or the collaboration. And so I think students felt a little bit burned out. Parents were a little bit concerned about too much screen time. It was tough on some families too that had, maybe 1 or 2 devices, but you had 2 or 3 children in the school. So now, we have a competition for devices, and that really made things difficult. So maybe you know, one child's online, but the other one wants to do some research or do some homework or whatever. So it was really a bit of a stretch for some families. So, you know, we had some people using iPads, some people using phones, some using their own devices like a laptop. But yeah, it was just a bit of I think, a juggling act. So I think for some families anyway, they just wanted things just to kind of just dial it back a little bit, so it was a bit more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, you know, to be in, you know, especially at a fee-based school where you're trying to deliver the education that, right, people are paying for, or,
Right.
you know, that some parents might take that stance, and you're doing too much of it. Yeah, and also this idea of, right, you know, normally schoolwork, you know, we think of it as, you know, there's stuff you do in school and then there's homework. But when you're home all day, you sort of have to reimagine how, you know, rethink about how time is used. And it's not necessarily homework versus classwork, but maybe synchronous versus asynchronous. Was that something that played into, you know, was that something that maybe evolved over time in the learning program as you dialed things back, or what did that look like at TIS Macau?
Well, I think what it came down to is finding that kind of that balance that made everybody happy. I think teachers too were a little bit you know, feeling a bit burned out and having to be online for a majority of the day, and just felt that there wasn't time for any kind of preparation, any kind of feedback, grading, whatever, or planning. So I think basically it came down to what's going to work the best for everybody concerned. And, you know, I think we had, in a way, different guidelines for different parts of the school. So I'm just trying to remember some of them. But I think in the primary school, for example, you know, each class would have a minimum of 2 online lessons in a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a maximum, maybe 3. And so the rest of the time was spent on something like, say, a Google Classroom, where content could be shared, resources, videos, etc. And I think that really worked well. There was enough contact with students with the teachers, students with their peers. And so that I think gave everybody that sense of community again, gave a sense of, you know, I'm in the classroom again, they can ask some questions. And I think that was a really good balance. But with that came some very clear expectations about, you know, being in attendance in those classes. And not only being in attendance, but being an active participant in the class. It's easy to, you know, put your, you know, join a meet or join a Zoom meeting, but, you know, maybe you put your picture up as opposed to your video. And so maybe you're engaged, maybe you're not, right? Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that we had to have some very clear guidelines on, and some expectations for students. So if we dial back the amount of online interactions, we wanted to make sure that they were quality interactions. And so, you know, again, when you're dealing with young people, teenagers, sometimes that doesn't work out. But you know, I think it's important that you have clear expectations and guidelines for the students and the parents. I think that was quite helpful. Another thing I think that I quite liked as a parent, and I know my daughter quite enjoyed as a student, was the use of screen recordings. And I think this is something that as a staff we didn't really do much of. But people started using things like Loom or Screencastify to record a lesson. explaining a concept, etc. And then posting that to something like Classroom or sharing it out by Seesaw and or by WhatsApp or WeChat. And I think that was something that people were like, yeah, this is really cool. Like students really liked it. And because it was an opportunity to, stop, pause, maybe go back, listen to that section again. And you can do that over and over again. And whereas if it's something that's live and it's just, you miss it for a split second or you're not paying attention, and then boom, it's gone, and you can't go back and what was that again, right? So I think I was quite pleased that a lot of staff started using those tools, and they found them to be quite powerful, and I know students really appreciated them. And I think those are things that you can just put into your toolkit, right? And I'm sure some of those will be pulled out again next year or the year after, just as an additional resource for teaching that particular concept in class.
Yes, I'm curious if maybe you can share a little bit more about, it sounds like that there was a lot of professional learning going on around technology. You said that's part of the, in terms of teachers learning new tools, new platforms, maybe new ways to use old tools. What did that look like? That was teacher to teacher? Were those things, from leadership to teacher? Can you describe a little bit about how that learning, I guess, disseminated and diffused throughout the school?
Okay, well, I think we've been building this capacity at the school for the past 5-6 years at least. 5 years ago, we started a laptop program at the secondary level, and so we realized that in order for that to be successful, that teachers had to have a certain amount of confidence and skills in terms of using technology and some of the apps that were available out there. So we're a G Suite school, so we did a lot of training, professional development related to G Suite and all the various apps. And so that's something that I played a part in, and would lead a lot of different professional development activities throughout the year. So there'd be some group things, individual things, one-on-one things. So people just saying, hey, I really want to be able to do this, but I don't know, I have a clue how to do that. Can you give me some ideas? And, there'd be a lot of just-in-time learning type scenarios out there. So I think over the years, people have grown each year in terms of their abilities with these tools. A couple of years ago, I convinced the admin to make it mandatory for teachers at the school to be Google Educator Certified Level 1. And so that's something that they agreed with. They could see the benefits of that. So we just tell teachers that this is something that you have to achieve, and you can achieve it on your own, or you can work with people like myself, and we do boot camps and training throughout the year to prepare people for that. And I think we've had a very positive response to those types of trainings. Even though there's maybe a few grumbles at the beginning, why do I have to do that kind of thing? But I think as people got involved and kind of learned about some of the things that these tools could do, they were really, wow, this is valuable and important. And I think now we're at the point where we have a real critical mass of teachers using these tools at a very, very high level. So it's really difficult to be an outlier. You're kind of like the odd person out. Whereas I think some schools, maybe if you're using high level technology, you're in the minority. But I think for us, it's not that case. I think the majority of our teachers are very well, highly trained, and use those different tools in very, very constructive ways, and ways that make learning and teaching, just much more engaging. Yeah, so I think we've seen this develop over a number of years. So I think, thankfully, that when we got the news that we were going online, that we had a fairly high level of capacity in the school, so that making that jump or that switch or pivot, whatever you want to call it, wasn't that big of a deal, to be honest. I think I'm going to say the vast majority were fine. Having said that, some people still had to learn about things like Zoom or Meet, which they maybe hadn't used before, or something like a Screencastify or a Loom. But I think they just had that confidence that, yeah, this is just learning something else. It's no big deal. Like, it's not like anything different than I've learned before. And I think they were able just to just jump on it and pick it up really quickly. I think what helped with that too is that everybody is part of a team. So maybe if you're in grade 4 teacher, you have a grade 4 team, and those teams are very, very collaborative. They typically meet once or twice a week and when school is open. And now that, even though the school was closed, they would still meet virtually and just have these discussions about projects, lesson plans, whatever. But I think some of those discussions also were geared towards technology and who's using what and how do I use it effectively, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that when it came time, when the pandemic hit and you guys went online, that all the grumbling about having to do all those trainings, people were thankful for it.
I think so. I hope so. I think people are seeing the benefits now. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what I'm hearing that this wasn't something that that your faculty at TIS Macau was, you didn't just flip a switch and all of a sudden people knew how to do these things, right? You said there were a few tools that folks had to learn, but that stance towards professional learning, towards technology use, you said it's just learning something new, right? Just learning one more thing, right? Mm-hmm. And they had the confidence to be able to do that. Now, I'm curious through this. We touched a little bit on it earlier, but the pandemic has transformed what school means to people, or maybe it's shined a brighter spotlight on what it means to people. How has the purpose of TIS in the community to its students, to its teachers, to its parents, maybe it changed because of this?
Well, I think I'll speak about parents and students. Mm-hmm. I think parents have a much better appreciation for the school and for what teachers do on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I know there was a lot of parents who found it quite stressful to have their child at home all day long, or maybe 2 children or 3, and having to work with them, maybe help try and teach something or support them or guide them in some way, and deal with a child who was maybe not very motivated, whatever. But I think there was a lot of parents who were just like, wow, those teachers do a lot of work and they do it really well. And I think there was parents basically when the children were allowed back in school, I think you could kind of hear these cheers in the community that thank God that they're back in school, because the parents can have a breather and kind of get back to a normal life for them, whether it was working or not. But So I think in terms of the you know, parental feedback has been very positive. I think yeah, I'm glad about that, because I think in this part of the world, it's the attitude that some parents is, I'm spending the money, I'm spending good money, and then and then that's it. And you do your thing with my kid during the day, and I don't have a role to play. And I'll come to the concert, and I'll maybe go to the teacher meeting, and then that's about it. So I think now I think they've got a sense of a little bit more of what's involved on a day-to-day basis. They probably realize that their child, maybe isn't as wonderful as they thought they were at school. Maybe they don't think as they were as bright as they thought they were. Maybe I think there was just a bit of a reality check for a lot of parents. I'll just say that. So I think the appreciation for the school and what teachers do has definitely gone up. And I think students too really, I think they've always really liked our school. The students, the one thing I've always liked about our school is that the students says they really love the school. They really like the teachers. They find it to be a really welcoming and safe learning environment. But just talking to students, they just said, yeah, I miss my friends, but I really miss hanging out with my teachers too. And they were really glad to be back. They were just like, thank God. They were kind of, going a little bit stir crazy at home. And maybe it was, there was the isolation part. Maybe they're spending too much time with their parents. Who knows? Probably a combination of things. But, they were they were thankful to get back. And everybody was just like this, this exhale once school started back. And I think everybody felt a sense of normalcy again, and just felt like, yeah, things are starting to turn around for the better.
Yeah, that's that's so true for schools in mainland China, or I guess really throughout East and Southeast Asia, where students have been able to return to school. That the joy in the community, that just being able to be back together, and in some sense, things feeling a more of a sense of normalcy, but also that a stronger connection among people, better understanding among the parent community what it is the schools do. And I think have all been big wins for international schools throughout the region. When you returned to school, and when you come back in the fall, what are some of the, in terms of teaching and learning practices that were going on, what are some of the things that stuck, or that you hope continue from that period of online learning into the fall?
Well, this is a question that I posed to staff at a general staff meeting. It was just, yeah, it's great to be back. Feels good, but I encourage them to take a moment to reflect upon what were some things that you did during the school closure that you hadn't done before, but that were effective, that students really liked, and I'd one, identify them, and two, really strongly consider about keeping those in your teaching toolkit and continue using them in the fall. What some of those things are, it's really difficult to say. The one thing I did encourage teachers to do was talk to their students and just say, what are some things from our online experience that you really liked, and see what they say. And get some feedback, and maybe you'll be able to make a decision about your teaching practice going forward. For me as a parent, and I think looking at some of my daughter's experiences, I know the screen recordings, the recorded lessons were fabulous. And I strongly encouraged, especially secondary teachers, to continue using that practice, just because I think it's quite powerful, and I think there's a lot of benefits to that. And I think ultimately it's going to end up saving teachers time and students time, because those things are quite powerful, and they can just be reused and reused again and again. And so for me, that's the big one. But I'm sure there's others. But I think, I think they need to talk to their students and then find out what some of those practices are.
Yeah, so that's interesting that to hear that. I guess you essentially posed this same question to to your faculty, and in doing so, I think demonstrates another capacity within the school to, or mindset, I should say, maybe to intentionally reflect on your practice to improve it. And I think through having those conversations, right? You said, 2 weeks into online learning, you reached out and you got a lot of feedback and you changed your practice, in response to what parents and students and teachers were saying. And you've presented your faculty with another opportunity to do that. This time, with an eye towards the fall, to, not just look back on those 3 months or 4 months as thank God that's over, but rather thank God that's over. And, I learned some things that really worked for me in my classroom and my students, and will be able to carry those with me. So, Mel, I really appreciate you taking some time to share about your experience at TIS Macau, about learning through the pandemic. It sounds like once you hit your stride, that things were able to have a really positive outcome to deliver learning for students through and beyond the pandemic. So thanks, Mel. Appreciate it.
No, glad to talk to you, and good luck with the research.
Thanks.